Shalom. I am Rabbi Davidovich, speaking to you on behalf of the webyeshiva.org, speaking to you from Efrat, Israel. Today I'm going to speak a little bit about this particular reading of the Torah, this particular Parsha for this week, which is Parsha Vayechi. The Parsha begins with the words Vayechi Yaakov Eretz Mitzrayim. Jacob lived in the land of Egypt. Then it goes on, but the interesting thing to talk about initially is that this particular parsha is called a parsha stuma, a closed parsha. What does that mean? Normally, if you look at the Torah as it's written in the scrolls, when one week's parsha finishes, the next one begins, there's a space between them. This particular parsha has no space between last week's Parsha Vayigash and Vayechi. It just as if it's almost one sentence continuing on, because there are no punctuation marks in the Torah. Rashi, the great commentator, gives a reason for this being a Parsha Stuma, gives one reason. He says the eyes of the children of Israel were closed because of the exile that was happening upon them. And also he says that Yaakov wanted to reveal the end of days, but God would not let him do so. But nonetheless, we see in this parsha that in fact Jacob's wish of revealing what would happen at the end of the days was uh, really, uh, really occurred. So let's look at some of the things. First of all, sorry for the delay. First of all, the Torah gives us a lot of hints. If you look at the beginning sentence of the Torah, it says that Yaakov lived in the land of Egypt, Sheva Esri Shana, 17 years. And then it goes on to say the life and the years of Jacob were 7 years and 140 years. So first of all, the question that is asked is, we know that when Jacob came to Egypt, he was 130 years old. We know the Torah does not waste a single word. Every word in the Torah is to give us a message. Yet here the Torah is telling us he lived till 147 years old. You could have done simple math and come up with that same answer. So why the words? So one of the things that the Meforshim tell us, Tibut Shalom says, is that when it refers to the Sheva Esri Shana, the 17 years, the letters, Hebrew letters for 17, are Yud Zayin. The numerical value is 17. And also the numerical value of the word tov, the Hebrew word for good, is 17, indicating that the last years of his life, even though it was the beginning of the exile into Egypt, the last years of his life were good, because whatever Jacob looked at, no matter what kind of difficulties there were, he realized that it was all for good. In giving the blessing to his sons, which is a part of this parsha, there is a sentence that ends one of the blessings that says, Lishuoscha kivisi Hashem. For your salvation I will hope, O God. Which teaches us that we can, by our hope of a better world, by our hope of seeing the end of the personal and nationalistic exile that the Jewish people are in, we can see for the coming of the Mashiach, the time when all that will end. And the secret to that, as well as the secret, the bedrock of Amunah, of faith in God, is kivisi. I hope. Kivisi Hashem. Lishuascha Hashem kivisi. I hope in your salvation. We have in the daily prayers, Kavi al Hashem chazak v'yamas libecha, hope in Hashem, and strengthen your heart. And then it says Kavi al Hashem. What does that mean? As my father, Al Shalom, Rabbi Davidovich, once said, he said, if you're hoping to God, you're praying to God, and God doesn't answer your prayers the way that you want, don't give up. Keep hoping. Keep praying. Yaakov wanted to reveal the end of the exile, what would happen at the end. And what he said, V'yikra Yaakov el banav lemor, he said to his son, saying, Hey, Ospu, gather yourselves together, Vagidu lechem, and I will tell you, Es asher es yikor eschem bakrischem. I'll tell you what will happen in the end of days. That's where Rashi says he wasn't allowed to say more. But the fact that he said, Hey, Asfu, gather yourself, that in itself is a very important message. It's a message of, if you want the Mashiach to come, if you want the horrible things that are happening to end, you have to gather yourself together. You have to have unity. There's a statement in the Gemara going into the concept of looking at everything as if it's good. It says, called the Abid Rahmana Lataba Abid. Everything that God does is for the good. I want to illustrate that by two stories from the Gemara and Brachot. One is a story of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva is on a journey and he tries to stop at an inn to lodge there that night, and they have no room. So he's got to go sleep in the forest. He goes to get ready to sleep in the forest. He has with him three things. He has with him a lantern. He has with him a goat, and he has three things with him: a lantern, and a goat, and there's one other thing. I just put out of my mind. A rooster. He has those three things. He's ready to go to sleep, and all of a sudden the wind comes and blows out the candle. So he's left totally in the dark. He says, Kol David Rahmana Latabav. Everything God does is for the good. Next thing that happens is a cat comes and eats his rooster. He says the same thing. Everything that God does is for the good. And a lion comes and eats the goat. So he's left all alone. Again, he says, Kol David Rahmana Latabav. Everything that Hashem does is for the good. In the morning, he wakes up and he realizes that during the night, an army invaded the city he was going to sleep in, took everybody captive. And he was saved because all these things happened to him. If the light had not gone out, they would have seen where he was. If the rooster had crowed, they would have heard his location. If the goat would have made sounds, that too would have revealed where he was. So this showed Kadoi Rahmana Latav Avi. Everything's for the good. We see things happening around us and we think that, oh, this is bad. No, we have to look for the good in everything and realize that everything that God does is for the good. There's another story quick story about uh, Nachumish Gamzu, who was given a treasure to take to the emperor. He stopped in an inn. The people stole the treasure and filled his container, his trunk with dirt. Came to the emperor and opened up the trunk, and there it was dirt. The emperor was upset. One of his servants says, "Well, maybe this is magical dirt." Takes a handful of dirt, sprays it out, and turns into different kinds of weapons so that they could defeat their enemies. He comes back and to the same inn, and they ask what happened. He told them. So they start taking dirt uh, from beneath the inn, and they bring that to the emperor. Of course, it was only dirt, and they suffered the consequences. The point of these two stories is that everything God does is for the good, even though we do not see it. I thank you for listening on behalf of the webyeshiva.org. I wish everybody a wonderful Shabbat, a Shabbos of unity, a Shabbos of seeing God's goodness in this world. Shabbat Shalom.